Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Zara and today I'm going to be talking about my top 10 favourite characters in fantasy. I tried to create a couple of rules around doing this. My only rule is that I didn't allow myself to have more than 2 characters from the same kind of series, but apart from that, that's pretty much it. So let's just jump right in. Before I go into my countdown of the top 10, I'm actually going to talk about a couple of honorable mentions. If you see me looking down, it's because I have a card with all the different characters listed. But a couple of honorable mentions. First is Shivers in the First Law universe. Shivers is a character that I gradually warmed up to. You come across Shivers, I think it's in Before They Are Hanged, if I remember correctly, and he is not the biggest fan of Logan because Logan killed his father, and so there is quite a bit of animosity there. But Shivers is one of the main POVs in Best Served Cold, which I don't think that's a spoiler. I think it actually says that on the blurb of the book. But Shivers is one of the main perspectives, and I got a very deep appreciation of him as a character and how his character develops throughout Best Served Cold. He's not a man of many words, but I don't know, there was something about him that I quite enjoyed. He's very kind of brutal. I mean, all the Northmen are, I guess, but Shivers in particular, he has this edge to him that I don't think some of the others necessarily have. And you see a different side to him in Best Served Cold, which I really enjoyed. The second honorable mention is kind of a funny one, but I also enjoy the series, and that is Azrael from ACOTAR. Azrael is the character that we probably know the least about with all the kind of side characters at the moment. He's a bit of an enigma, and he kind of has this side to him that I think we're all really excited to see. Fans of ACOTAR will know what I'm talking about. We got more screen time with him in A Court of Silver Flames, the most recent book that came out at the beginning of this year. There's a lot more to explore with Azrael, and I'm very excited to go there. The third one is Inej. So Inej is a character from the Six of Crows duology. I love Six of Crows. It's such a good YA series, and it's just a good fantasy series all around. I don't think you necessarily need to categorize it as good YA fantasy, it's just good fantasy. But I felt that Inej was a little bit of a kindred spirit in certain ways. She is a person of color and she's totally badass. I think Inej was actually one of the first person of color characters that I had read at the time. So that was really nice to read a character who has brown skin and black hair and, you know, doesn't look like the typical YA female protagonist that we get. Not even just YA female fantasy protagonists, just generally the fantasy protagonists all look the same. Next is Yorg from the Broken Empire trilogy by Mark Lawrence. This one I kind of have an inner battle on because I detested Yorg in the first Broken Empire trilogy book, which is Prince of Thorns. But I think his character development in the second book, King of Thorns, and then you go to Emperor of Thorns, I think his character development is really satisfying, and you learn more about his background, even though it doesn't justify it, why he is the way that he is and why he has the issues that he has. I enjoyed his arc. By the end of it, I really enjoyed where his character was going. I think if Mark Lawrence revisited the world, I would totally be up for reading more from the perspective of Yorg. And then the last one is Elend from the Mistborn series. I really like Elend. He's your kind of typical academic who doesn't like fighting, isn't particularly good at it. His asset is his mind and his intellect. He starts off a little bit wet, if you know what I mean, but I feel like he really grows into his own as the books develop. I really like his relationship with Vin at the start in particular as well. It's a relationship of equals in my opinion. She is obviously physically a lot stronger than him, but he, I would argue, is intellectually a lot stronger than her. So you have these two people who are quite different in certain ways, but then when they come together, they're a real powerhouse, and I love that. So those are some of my honorable mentions. We're going to go into my top 10 now. The number 10 spot, we have Alizaid Al-Qahtani from the Daevabad trilogy. I've recently finished the Daevabad trilogy and I loved Ali. Such a fantastic character. He starts off as having very strong religious beliefs, and then as he gets more and more exposed to the different groups of people around him, he really starts to kind of alter the way that he thinks, but without completely revoking what he already thinks. In the Daevabad trilogy, there are 3 perspectives that you follow. In the second and the third book, if I remember correctly. Ali's chapters for me were hands down the best. I would often just like read really quickly through the other two just to get to his chapters, and then I would really savor those chapters. He stole the show for me. I love the ending of the David Ballard trilogy, and there is definitely room to explore more within the world, even whether it's with those characters or other characters, and I really hope Ali is involved in that in some way, shape or form. In the number 9 slot is Severus Snape from the Harry Potter series. Severus Snape is one of the most tragic characters you will ever read. I remember when I read the last book and we kind of got that revelation as to why Snape was the way that he was and why he treated Harry the way that he did and why he's kind of always such an angry person. When we get that realization of his love for Lily, it was one of the few things that like broke something in me a little bit. And I think they did a really good job of showing that in the film as well. I think it kind of enhanced that moment where we had that kind of big reveal. But Snape is tragic. He is loyal up until his last breath, and he doesn't get appreciated for that until after that. And it's really sad, and even thinking about it now is making me sad, and I think he was written incredibly well as a character. In the 8th place, we have Veridus from The Faithful and the Fallen by John Gwynne. First BAV chapter that we had with Veridus, I knew for a fact he was going to be my favorite, because Veridus is loyal to a fault. I knew there was going to be a moment where he realized that he was actually on the wrong side. And when he goes through a certain realization, you really feel for him, but you also were wanting him to get there as soon as possible so that the inevitable could happen. I loved his character. I think his character developed incredibly well. He became increasingly confident, and his military prowess really shone through. I loved his interactions with Kywin as well, and I just think he's a really, really well-written character. In the 7th place, we have Bilbo Baggins. So a couple of months back, I read The Hobbit, or reread The Hobbit, and I loved it. I think Bilbo in certain ways is so innocent and kind of so naive. You know, obviously at the beginning of The Hobbit, he doesn't really know what he's getting himself into, even though he didn't really choose to do it. It was all kind of Gandalf's shtick, but he doesn't really know what he's getting himself into, and then he actually bumbles his way through so many different situations and makes the best out of them completely unintentionally, which I kind of love. I get a smile on my face whenever I think about The Hobbit and whenever I think about Bilbo, because he's just your kind of bumbling little hobbit who doesn't really know what he's doing, but somehow makes the best out of a bad situation whenever it arises, which I think is fantastic. In the 6th place, we have Kaz Brekker from the Six of Crows duology by Lee Bardugo. Kaz Brekker, such a good character. He has a lot of depth, which you don't really appreciate that initially. I mean, I definitely didn't. But once we get more understanding about why he is the way that he is and what happened to him when he was younger and how he was able to get to his position, you really appreciate the complexity and depth in his character. I also think he develops as a character quite a lot from book 1 to book 2. I love his relationships and his interactions with all of the different people involved, one in particular. And I don't want to spoil it, so I'm not going to say any more. But Kaz is fantastically done. And I want to reread the Six of Crows duologies at some point, because I mean, his POV and Inej's POVs were my favorite too. And I want to experience those again. In 5th place, we have Sazed from the Mistborn trilogy by Brandon Sanderson. Sazed, pretty much from the minute that we meet him, became my favorite character. He's so humble. He's so kind of self-sacrificing in certain ways. I just love that he's kind of very honorable and he really cares about the group that he's a part of. He goes through this kind of identity crisis throughout the 3 books where he kind of questions his own beliefs. And I found that whole kind of arc really satisfying, because I think I can kind of empathize with that situation where you're thinking through something that you really believe in and you've believed in for a while, and then you're trying to figure out, like, is that actually what you believe? And if not, then what do you believe? So I love that. And I think, you know, the big reveal at the end of the 3rd book, you know, all the characters play a role in that. And I think Sazed's role in that is just really well executed. Didn't see any of the ending coming, and it was super satisfying. So Sazed definitely takes one of my top 5 spots. In 4th place, we have Samuel Vimes from the City Watch collection by Terry Pratchett. So I read Gars Gars, I think it was towards the end of last year. He's a character that's stuck in my mind, so I sometimes go back and read Samuel Vimes' quotes, because he says some really remarkably philosophical things. And Vimes is just, the way that I think about Vimes is he's just a good guy trying to do the best that he can in the situation that he's in. he's surrounded by some pretty idiotic people. He's just trying to do his best. And I think his kind of commentary on what's going on is really funny. But there are undertones of something a lot deeper there, which I think Pratchett just does well in every regard, whether it's with characters or plot. I don't know, Vimes is really stuck in my mind for a while. And I love Vimes' interactions with other characters and how he kind of tries to get them to be the best version of themselves, or at least attempts to anyway. So Vimes is definitely at my number 4 spot. He could potentially move up. I'm going to be reading Men at Arms at some point. I want to say soon, but realistically, I've got quite a lot of other books that I really need to read first. I want to get to it at some point relatively soon. So Vimes takes the 4th spot. So we're down to the final 3. In 3rd place, we have Glocta from the First Law trilogy by Joe Abercrombie. Glocta, I think, is a lot of people's favorite. I love Glocta. I think the way that Abercrombie wrote him is absolutely pure genius. His honor monologues give me life, honestly. I've never related to a character that is so dissimilar to me than I have with Glocta. And I think his development throughout the books is not necessarily like a huge change, but there are certain subtleties about him that change throughout the 3 books, and it's really satisfying to watch. And that's all I'm going to say, otherwise I'm just going to keep talking about First Law, and I've got 2 videos coming up about the First Law soon, so I'll hold myself until then. And then in 2nd place, we have Tia Amundsen from The Winter Road by Adrian Selby. I've talked about The Winter Road quite a lot on my channel now. I love it. You should go and read it. And Tia Amundsen has got to be the best female character that I've ever read. She's gritty, she's intelligent, she is vulnerable, and that's the thing that I loved most about her. I think a lot of the times in fantasy, women are often not shown as having emotion, and if they are shown as having emotion, it's a weakness. Whereas Tia Amundsen, there's multiple times where she cries throughout the book, and it's never like looked down upon by the other characters. Like, it's something that she owns, and it's something that the other characters don't really see as a weakness, which I love. And I love how Selby wrote her progression throughout the story. Because of that, I'm very excited to read the other 2 books that he's written, one of which I'm reading, I think, like next week. And I've heard he writes female characters extraordinarily well. If he writes his other 2 characters even half as good as Tia Amundsen, I know I'm going to be happy. All right, in the 1st place, there'll be a couple of people who would have guessed this by now, because there's no way that this character could not be on this list. And because I haven't said him yet, he has to obviously take the number 1 spot. And that is Logan Ninefingers from the First Law trilogy by Joe Abercrombie. Logan is so good. It's so weird because I identify with Logan in certain ways, like quite a few ways. The thing I love about Logan is that he's just so done with everything. He's done with life. He's done with war. Obviously, he has this other side to him, the Bloody Nine, which comes out, and it's obviously an incredibly violent and brutal version of himself. The thing about Logan, though, I always kind of think about him as 2 different characters, right? Because I think Bloody Nine is, we don't really know what the Bloody Nine is, right? Like, whether it's because he has spirits inside of him, whether it's somebody else controlling him, whether it's, I don't know, he's got like a split personality, it could be a mental affliction. We don't know. That's kind of something that I don't think we can speculate, obviously, but we don't really have a clear answer for that. But Logan as an individual, taking that bit away, I really do believe is a good person. He's the one person in the whole group that everybody goes to. Pharaoh eventually warms up to him in some way, in her own way. Jezul calls him the best man that he's ever met, and that scene genuinely made me tear up. I've mentioned many times before, I do not cry in books, and that scene dropped a tear, a couple of tears, I think, for sure. It was like so emotional. And the way that Joe Abercrombie wrote it, like, you really, really felt for him. I just wanted to give him a hug. And then you have his guys, Dogman, Three Trees, all the other guys who, really care about him, and they kind of reference him when they're separated, in the 2nd book in particular. And the 1st book. I think Logan is the piece that kind of ties them all together. And I love that the kind of brute is shown in that way. And I think his arc is absolutely fantastic. And I love that his storyline kind of comes full circle. And I think that's something that Abercrombie just does very well in general, cyclical narratives for certain characters. But Logan, hands down, takes the spot. He's just perfectly executed. He is an incredibly flawed character. He does some really messed up stuff, both as Logan and as the Bloody Nine, but I generally think at his very core, he is a good man trying to be better. And you get those inner thoughts throughout the 3 books, where he is kind of battling with that sense of like, who is he and who does he want to be? I love that. I live for it, and I'm so sad that I'll never get to experience that for the first time ever again, but it is what it is. So there you have it. Those are my top 10 fantasy characters that I love of all time as of today. Let me know if you agree, if you disagree with any of these characters, if you were surprised that any of these characters were here. I'd love to hear your thoughts. But otherwise, I will see you in my next video. Hope you all have a lovely day, and I'll speak to you soon. Take care, everybody. Bye.